the Mariners are one of these teams that we've talked about that need to do more. And trading Castillo would help them in a couple of ways. It would clear money and it would bring talent back. And I would imagine that they're going to keep trying to do it.
FT Senior Insider Ken Rosenthal with us right now. Ken, let's start with Brent Rooker's extension with the A's, who are spending a lot more than most teams this offseason. What did you think of the contract and the move for them to solidify this guy in their lineup for years to come, who obviously had a huge year, back-to-back big seasons now for the A's?
Scott, the first thing people need to understand is that it covers 3 arbitration years and 2 free agent years. So when you look at the number and say, how is it possible he got only $60 million? That's the reason. And he's largely a DH. That depresses it somewhat as well. So it's still a good deal for him in that it guarantees him that much money, and it has a vesting option that could take this to 6 years and $90 million perhaps at the max. So that's Rooker's perspective. Obviously, you might ask, well, why does he want to play for the A's? But he's got 3 more years with the A's if they don't trade him anyway, so he might as well get paid. From Oakland's perspective, they are trying, it seems, to establish more of a foundation. And they did that with the Severino deal. They've done that with the Jeffrey Springs deal. They want to start building as they go forward here. At least the baseball operations side does. They also have the payroll question that we've talked about, and you've got Evan Drellick on later. He can enlighten you further on that, but they've got to hit a certain minimum to avoid being in trouble from a collective bargaining agreement standpoint. All of these factors combined are why the A's are doing this kind of deal, as well as some of the other things that they have done. And it's healthy in terms of finally establishing some stability with the players that they have and an identity for their years in Sacramento. And with Rooker, they'll be taking him into Vegas as well, assuming that they get to Vegas.
If they get to Vegas is the best point. 2 questions for you. One, Ken, would the A's be doing this if they didn't have to? Which I know you said Evan Drellick might be able to answer better, but I don't think they would because they have to spend money. So now they are doing this. It's great for Rooker. I love Rooker. And then 2, after you answer that, why in the world did Dave Cavall resign if they're out there spending all this money and all of a sudden he's like, peace, boys, I'm going to hang out in Oakland while you guys move to Sacramento and then Vegas if they get there?
Well, I'm not sure about Cavell. I don't know the exact reasons for his resignation and why that went wrong. It seems like he was the guy to get the Vegas deal or help them get the Vegas deal and then just move on. As for do they need to spend this money? Now, this is kind of an interesting question. As Evan and I have reported, they've got to get to a certain level with their luxury tax payroll to avoid this question with the collective bargaining agreement. Now, they would only face most likely a grievance if they didn't get there, but it would be a horrible look. They faced this kind of grievance before. The team I'm actually watching more closely now in this regard is the Miami Marlins because they have not spent money. They've offloaded some money, and they are well short of where they're going to need to be. And if they want to trade Sandy Alcantara, which I expect they will if he shows he's healthy in the first half, then they have a real concern, it would appear to me, of not getting to the appropriate number. So I'm watching the A's, but I'm probably watching the Marlins more closely in this particular perspective right now.
Is there another A's player that could be in line for some of this money? I mean, if they're divvying out money and they can't get free agents to come over there, I know they got Severino, but if they can't get free agents to come over there, is there another player that they could start handing out extensions? Because I know one of the superstars that they had, they offered one of these extensions back in Oakland, and he declined it, and he went on to make hundreds of millions. But is there someone else that's in line that would be next in line after Rooker here?
I don't know that they have anyone particularly in mind, but Lawrence Butler certainly would be a possibility. J.J. Bleday, J.P. Sears, the younger players that they have who are, I wouldn't say more established, but guys who you might want to build around. Certainly they might try to do some more things along those lines. Mason Miller would be another good example, though he is a reliever, and it's tricky with relievers extending them. I don't think we've seen many of those over the years. So I don't know that they'll stop here. They probably shouldn't stop here, but to me, the one good thing about all of this is that they're trying to build a competitive team at a time where I think Scott mentioned this right off the top. Other teams are just kind of lagging along, doing their thing, and not worrying about competing as much as they should.
Another team that fans are worried about, Ken, not necessarily us, are the Braves. And they're like, oh, Alex Anthopoulos, he's not trying this year. But, I mean, they have a good team. They still have a good team lined up, especially if Spencer Strider comes back. Could they use another starter? Almost every team could use another starter. Could they use a bullpen help? Almost every team can use bullpen help. So what's going on with the Braves, and why are their fans freaking out so much?
I'm not sure why their fans are freaking out so much. I'm not inside their heads. But as far as the Braves are concerned, I wrote about them today. And they're in an interesting situation. As you remember, at the start of the offseason, they made all these cost-cutting moves, which gave you the indication that they were going to try to do some bigger things, perhaps during the offseason. Now, at the time, they were worried about Strider, worried about Acuna Jr., and of course, worried about Joe Jimenez, who likely will be out for most of the season. What has happened is that they are more encouraged now that Strider and Acuna will be back sooner rather than later. Strider's going to have a full spring training. He's going to pitch in games. They're not going to open the season with him. That's not the plan, but it's certainly something where early in the first half you could see him. And the same is true for Acuna. He is on track with his recovery. If he took the same timeline he did when he came off the first knee surgery, the other knee, then he could be ready by mid-March. But if you recall, of course, he wasn't all there that year. He wasn't himself. So they're going to take their time, and they're going to give him additional time to get himself as strong as possible with that knee. So given that, all right, the situation's not as urgent. Yes, you still would want another starter who could start a playoff game. That's an obvious thing for the Braves to pursue. And they still could use an outfielder, one who could mostly be a backup once Acuna was healthy. But the biggest need right now, the bigger need, is probably the reliever, because Jimenez is not coming back most likely in 2025. They've been involved in Tanner Scott, so have a lot of teams, and I expect them to do some more things. It's just very unusual for Alex Anthopoulos, who is one of the more aggressive GMs, to be this quiet for this long.
Some of the guys that Alex has taught have been the ones that now, Perry Manasian out in LA is like, oh, I'm going to make all my moves, just like Alex taught me. And Alex is like, wait a minute, you're taking my storybook there. My question is the Orioles. The Orioles have made a lot of, small one-piece moves. Do you feel like, besides Tyler O'Neill, it's a 3-year, I think he got a 3-year deal, but is this a move based on the fact that the Orioles think their team is still good enough to make the playoffs and they're like, you know what, we can patch it together? Or is it maybe an inkling into what kind of spending this new ownership is actually going to give Mike Elias?
Maybe a little bit of both, Eric. And they are an interesting team right now. Even Tyler O'Neill, you mentioned him on a 3-year deal. He has a 1-year opt-out. So if he has a big year, he too is a 1-year guy. My thought was they needed a front of the rotation starter with the loss of Corbin Burns, and they haven't done that. They've gotten Sagano from Japan. He's 35. Charlie Morton, he's 41. I know he's Charlie Morton and he's really good. He is 41. You can't expect him to be what he was at 35 or whatever. So it seems to me the way they are constructing their team is that, yes, like you said, they're aiming for a playoff perhaps situation, but for World Series championship, I don't know that we're looking at that right now. And at a time when the American League is weak and at a time when they have all this young position talent, in my opinion, they should be more aggressive. And what I'm hearing or starting to hear in the industry is Mike Elias, their GM, is really good at drafting. We know that. He's put this team together and he put the Astros teams together. Is he really good, though, at major league moves, at building a World Series caliber team? That we have not seen yet. And I don't know how much of it's on ownership. I don't know how much of it is on Elias's method of operation. Certainly it would appear now that they have more money. The owner has said that they would be spending more, and yet they really haven't done it in a big way. People can say, well, they signed O'Neill, they signed Gary Sanchez, and Morton, and Sagano. These are, as you said, Eric, kind of piecemeal moves. They're not the major dramatic trades or signings that you would expect. They did that last year with Corbin Burns, and it worked out really well, but they knew at the time he was only a 1-year guy. So I have wanted to see more from them. I've expected to see more from them. And you talk about maybe regrouping at the deadline. All these teams can look at it that way. But at the deadline, who knows who's going to be available, and who knows what the competition for these players is going to be. So I thought the Orioles had a real opportunity here in a league that is watered down to kind of make a statement and make a big move this winter. They haven't done that. They're still going to be good, and I expect they'll be a playoff team, but if I were a fan of theirs, I would have wanted to see more.
So let me ask you about Luis Castillo, because I think he actually would be a nice fit in that rotation, and that those two teams could match up because the Mariners want to improve their offense, but they don't want to spend any money. And the Orioles have young position players. You wrote about Castillo in your notes column, and I think it was a week ago I brought him up, and I was like, what is he, maybe a 3 now? And some other friends on this show were like, oh, how dare you? But I think some front offices are looking at him that way.
Yes, I agree, Scott. And some of the numbers are trending downward. Velocity, strikeout rate, those are concerns. Of course, his home road splits. He's been much better in Seattle since joining the Mariners than he has been on the road. These are the kinds of things that concern teams. Now, he's still really good. He's still Luis Castillo, and at $22.75 million a year for the next 3 years, each of the next 3 years, to me, in this market, the way prices for starting pitching is soaring, I would expect he'd still be a really good addition, at least for the first year or so. But because of the trends that I just described, teams might not be willing to give up as much, and the Mariners are looking for major league help or close to it. So it hasn't happened so far for the Orioles with Castillo or any other club. Not saying it won't happen, but the Mariners are one of these teams that we've talked about that need to do more. And trading Castillo would help them in a couple of ways. It would clear money and it would bring talent back. And I would imagine that they're going to keep trying to do it.
Wow. Speaking of trades, yesterday on the show, we discussed the Dodgers infield and how they had 7 infielders for 4 spots if you count Mookie Betts as an infielder. Well, they went out about an hour after the show, traded Gavin Lux to the Reds. Where does he fit with the Reds? Because we just looked at their lineup. Is he going to play second, move Matt McClain to center? And then does this free it up for Kim to be the second baseman every day for the Dodgers?
AJ, it's a really good question from both teams' perspectives. Lux, it seems to me, is going to be someone that the Reds bounce around, use him as a left-handed hitter. He's good against right-handed pitching. They can play him, obviously, at second, perhaps at third, and he's played some outfield. Matt McClain, who, if you recall, was the Reds' best player 2 years ago, better than Ellie De La Cruz. He was the guy. He is obviously a second baseman, but he too has played some outfield, and it seems to me they're just collecting pieces. Well, with Lux, they're collecting a piece that can help them. Now, how he's going to help them is not exactly clear, and obviously injuries could affect this. McClain's recovery from what he was dealing with last year, he might not be ready to go on an everyday basis right away. So that's the Reds' idea here. The Dodgers remain, as always, a fascinating case study. I don't know that they're going to play Kim every day. When they acquired him, they said he's going to be a super utility type. We'll bounce him around a little bit. Now, they have a number of middle infield options, right? They've got Miguel Rojas still. They've got Tommy Edman, who looks like he'll play center field. They've got Chris Taylor. So they can do a number of things. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Mookie Betts ends up at shortstop. A lot of people, including myself, question why this is going on, why the Dodgers are forcing this. And it seems that Mookie Betts wants to do this. He wants a shot at doing it after a full off season of training and a full spring training. Didn't get that last year. If anybody wants to count out Mookie, be my guest. It's a hard thing to do. That said, playing shortstop is also a hard thing to do. And if it doesn't work out in spring, or if they're not comfortable with it, he's not comfortable with it, at that point, it becomes a little bit more clear how they could go about this. You've got then Rojas to play short. You've got Kim. You've got Edman on certain days if you want. And Mookie plays second. I don't know how it's going to turn out. They could still add another infielder. Maybe they get Kike Hernandez back. That's something that I'm sure they're thinking about. So spring training will tell a lot with the Dodgers, as it has in the past. But they have so many options, and it seems good options as well.
Here's my problem with grocery shopping. I don't want to waste precious time in life making the trip to the store, and I've got food allergies that make my in-person experience even more of a challenge. Those problems are now gone. Introducing HungryRoot to the FT fam.
Now we can all be bougie with our own personal shopper to handle the food shopping, including recs based on what you're looking to put in your body.
Just say, hey, HungryRoot, here's what I'm looking for, and they load up your cart with personalized recommendations. And those recs keep evolving as they learn about what you're into.
You're going to love HungryRoot as much as FT does. Take advantage of this exclusive offer for a limited time. Get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to HungryRoot.com/FT and use code FT. That's HungryRoot.com/FT, code FT to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. HungryRoot.com/FT, code FT. Get after it, FT fam. All right, Ken, one more from your notes column. I'm not going to give it all away because I encourage people to obviously sign up for The Athletic if they don't have it and check out what you put together this morning. But of the other two teams we haven't hit, the Angels and the Rays, do you think either of those teams do something interesting over the next month or so?
The Angels are a better bet. And the way I wrote about them today is that they're one of the few teams that is in a decent position to sign a free agent who rejected a qualifying offer and give up a draft pick. In their case, they're drafting number 2 overall. That's where they ended up in the lottery. And their next pick after that is likely to be number 47. That's the one they would lose if they signed, say, Anthony Santander, Alonso, Bregman, Nick Pivetta, the 4 remaining free agents who rejected qualifying offers. And if you do that, if you give up your 47th pick, then why not give up your 3rd pick as well? Because they've got another 3rd round pick coming a little bit later in the round as compensation for a player they did not sign in last year's draft. Could they do all this? Is it worth doing all that is the better question. If Mike Trout is healthy and you can get Santander to go with Soler and Trout, that's an interesting middle of the lineup to say the least. Alonso and Bregman would fit the same way. But is Mike Trout going to be healthy? The Angels lost a franchise record 99 games last year. Do you think one move like this or even 2 moves like this will make you a contender even after some of the other things you've done? That's a good question. And as I mentioned, the American League is not as strong as it's been in the past, and maybe the Angels ultimately determine we've got a chance here. 3 wild cards, we've got a chance. More power to them if they do. I'm not sure that giving up draft picks where they are and spending money on the players who are left is the right thing to do.
Makes sense. All right, Ken, before we let you go, I can't let you get out of here, especially after the new year, without giving you a little bit of grief. So explain your Hall of Fame ballot to me, because I looked at it and I'm confused.
Well, why don't you ask me a question? What don't you like about it?
Yeah, what specifically?
Well, okay, so you said you didn't vote for Andy Pettitte. Why?
Okay, because I don't feel that he is at the level of a Hall of Fame starting pitcher. Now, I'm open to changing my mind in the future, and if Sabathia gets in, as I wrote, it becomes a lot tougher to keep Andy Pettitte out, and I do expect Sabathia to get in. Their numbers are quite comparable. I just don't see Pettitte as strongly as I see Sabathia as a Cooperstown guy. Next question.
Okay, next question. You voted Andrew Jones, but not Torrey Hunter. Why? Because if you look at their numbers, much like Sabathia and Pettitte, they're very similar.
Yes, and I see Andrew Jones as an all-time great defender. Torrey was a really good defender. I don't see him in the same way. Now, Andrew Jones has
10 Gold Gloves, one has 9.
Hold on. Andrew Jones has some negatives against him too.
Child, Ken, don't shush me.
Well, don't talk about your former teammate and just try to pump him up.
I played with both
But
of
no,
them.
fair
I
enough.
played with both of them.
Bring me in.
AJ, it's a fair
One
question.
more thing. I mean, I know this isn't necessarily how AJ's playing ball, but this is how many writers play ball, and I'm an Andrew Jones in the Hall of Fame guy. I will point this out. WAR number is big for many writers, and 62.7 is the number for Andrew, 50.7 is the number for Torrey. That's a huge difference. It is.
Okay.
That's how a lot of writers look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, AJ, to be perfectly honest, as I see the Pettitte Sabathia thing, I see Andrew Jones here and I see Torrey here. Now, let me make one thing clear. Torrey was a great player. Andy Pettitte was a great player. But we're talking about the Hall of Fame. We're talking about the ballot. And it's tough to distinguish between these guys. And WAR is something that we all consider. I don't know that it's a determining factor. I just don't see Torrey, as good as he was, at the same level as Andrew Jones. And Andrew Jones was not a great offensive player. We all know that. But he had his moments, and defensively, he was transformative. This guy was maybe the best center fielder we've ever seen. You can count Gold Gloves all you want. You know, AJ, Andrew Jones was a better center fielder. As good as Torrey was, better than Torrey.
He knows it. He knows it.
And I don't know, because I watched Torrey jump over the walls, did all kinds of
Torrey was, hey, listen,
Andrew was great.
really
Listen, I played with both these guys. I love both these guys. Obviously, I played with Torrey longer than I played with Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, to me, I just look at it, and I know everyone puts all their stock in WAR, but I can make all kind of WAR arguments that don't.
But can we
up.
get Andrew in first, and then we could talk about Torrey too?
That's
Andrew
fine.
should be in.
But Andrew Jones should have been in. If Andrew Jones didn't completely fall apart at the end of his career, Andrew Jones would have been in first ballot.
Yes.
He completely fell apart at the end of his career.
Yeah, but
injuries,
He did,
age,
that's the
whatever
reason he
you wanna
hasn't gotten
say.
it.
right.
That's exactly. Now, I'm looking at your ballot, and listen, Ichiro, 100% first ballot guy.
Thank
Chase, Chase and Jimmy, they're kind of in the Scott they're in the Scott Rowland argument for
He
me.
got
Like
in.
really, really good. Are they Hall of Famers? Maybe if they get in, yes. I don't know. Okay, Carlos Beltran's kind of in the same boat. I know he had a great career. Yes. Okay. And then Billy Wagner should be in to me too, just because I faced him, and he's a really good fella, and he was nasty on lefties. But but you left 3 votes out. Why didn't you just vote for 10? He's a really good fella. That counts.
I didn't vote for 10,
why didn't you
AJ,
vote for
because
10 though?
Because, as I wrote, my concern is always lowering standards and not getting the right people in. Now, you can argue, and fairly argue, that we have not properly represented the current generation of players. We need more Hall of Famers. That's fair. But I'm not just going to fill in 10 because we have 10 slots available. I'm going to vote for the guys who I think are most deserving. Now, there are some really interesting guys that I left off that are going to get support. And if you might make the case, hey, if you voted for Utley, why not Dustin Pedroia? Well, Utley's career was a little bit longer. If you are looking at starting pitching, why not Felix Hernandez, who had 10 dominant seasons? Okay, his career ended before it should have too, maybe because he was worked too hard. These are all fair questions. These are all things that people like me have to debate and wonder about. But I'm not going to give those votes away easily. I'm going to be pretty, what's the word? Not old school, not hard, but selective, I guess would be the word, in how I go about it. That's just the way I go about it.
See, this is what I want. Yes, Felix is in, homered off of him. Yes, Pettit should be in, homered off of him. Yes, CC should be in, homered off of him.
This is why you don't get a vote.
Well, that's the way I look at it.
Hey, Ken, JJ Cooper voted for Brian McCann, so we'll bring him on at some point to.
Right? Listen, if you look at Brian McCann's numbers, you can make a good argument that Brian should be in.
There are a number of people, mostly on the analytical side, who have said that Russell Martin and Brian McCann are really strong candidates. I don't necessarily see it that way, and a lot of the argument for those guys is based on framing, which to me is, yes, a valuable skill, but I don't know that it's something that should be putting people over the top for Hall of Fame. I don't see those guys in the same light as I see Posey, as I see Molina, but the case is interesting in both regards. And again, as we go forward, I'm assuming these guys are going to get 5%. As we go forward, these are guys to consider. I'm going to leave you with this, AJ. You asked me about Torrey. You asked me about Andrew Jones. You know who you didn't ask me about? Jim Edmonds. Jim Edmonds. Mark Burley is another interesting guy. But Jim Edmonds, who is off the ballot, we should have given him a longer look. He was a really good offensive player as well as like a 7-time Gold Glove winner. And sometimes these things happen, and those are the omissions and the decisions that really trouble me, because Edmonds should be in our conversation still, and he's not.
Agree.
Guys fall off.
Agree. Bernie Williams. I mean, Jorge
JJ
Posada.
Cooper was pissed about Kenny Lofton. Kenny Lofton fell off. It was during a weird
Kenny
time
Lofton's
period.
a good example too.
Kenny Lofton.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. Well, Ken, thank you for explaining.
Anybody AJ hit a homer off, and anybody who got a hit off a pitcher that he was catching should be in the Hall of Fame. That's the way I see it, honestly.
Oh, Kratz isn't in.
There's some random names that are going to be Hall of Famers then. Well, Ken, thank you. We'll see you on Fair Territory later this week.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.